So, welcome to Push to Be More with me, your host, Matt Edmundson. Great that you're here with us this week. We are going to be talking about what it means to push, to be, and more. We're going to look at those things we have to push through, the hurdles we have to get through, what it is to recharge our batteries, and what does growth look like. And to do that, today I'm chatting with my good friend, Andrew Hartshorn, who is a specialist at helping businesses, get ready for exit. Yes, we're going to be talking about those kind of things coming up. But before we get into it, let me tell you about Pod Junction. If you're a regular to the show, you'll know what I'm going to say. If you're new to the show, very warm welcome to you, by the way. But Pod Junction is the company that makes this show possible. It's all about helping you set up your own podcast and using it to grow your own business. And if you want to know more about them, check it out at podjunction.com. You'll see Sadaf there, who's started to co-host some of these shows. And go check it out. Go talk to Sadaf. In fact, there is a podcast called Pod Junction, if you're into the podcasting world, where we just talked about how to use podcasting to grow your business. So you can find out more podjunction.com. Do go check them out because they're awesome. So that's enough for that. Let's talk to Andrew. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Loving the studio.
It's unusual actually doing this podcast in person.
Yeah.
So normally I would say with Push 99 times out of 100, we would do this online.
Right.
So it's quite nice having someone in the studio.
No, it's great to be here.
In fact, we've got a queue of people.
There's a queue out the door. So we better get a move on.
Yeah. We've actually got a bunch of people today in the studio. We're going to be talking to Jamie and Steve. That will be another episode actually for the listeners, but for us it'll be in a little while.
Yeah,
which will be good. So let's jump into it, right? We're going to get into your story, but the question I like to ask everybody at the start of the show: if you had your own podcast, because you've been on a few podcasts, but you don't actually have your own, right?
No, I don't have my own.
Okay, so if you did have your own podcast and you could have anybody on as a guest from your past or your present that's just had a big influence on your life, who would your guest be and why?
It's got to be Elon Musk, hasn't it?
Okay.
You either love him or you hate him.
And which camp do you fall in?
Well, I just think...
Or both.
I don't see how people can not see him as a genius.
Yeah.
Some people may think of an evil genius, but when you look at how many huge things he's doing all at once, you've got to sort of take your hat off to somebody like that. So I think it'd be quite fascinating to get him in a room and find out what makes him tick.
Yeah. He's a really interesting character, isn't he? I've heard a number of interviews with him.
Yeah.
And I have opinions. Some good, some not so good on some of the things that he says. I've never met him, and I would love to.
Yeah.
Elon, if you're watching, just...
I mean, nobody's all good or all bad, are they, at the end of the day? So you've got to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt.
You have got to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt, but he's a really interesting character, and I can see why. I mean, the stuff that he's doing... I love this attitude which says, you know what, I'm just going to have a go.
Yeah.
No one's been to Mars yet. Let's do that. Do you know what I mean? It's that kind of that mentality.
The other side of it is when you look at everything he's doing, there is actually, you can see a strategy in the background where they're actually all linked together at some point. It all comes together at some point.
Yeah.
Who knows when that will be? And that will be interesting.
It'll be interesting to see. And I'm curious to see how he handles his new role. With the Trump administration.
Yeah. Oh, that will be fun, yeah.
He's I can't remember his official title, but he's basically trying to cut back on...
Department of Efficiency, isn't it?
Yeah,
something
something
he called
like
it Doge or something, which is quite amusing.
The Doge.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. I was always curious what would happen if you took someone like Branson, and said, "Can you run the NHS?"
No, it'd be fascinating.
Do you know what I mean?
I think we're about to witness that.
We're about to witness that kind of thing, 100%. Aren't we?
Yeah.
And what happens when you take a successful entrepreneur of a global organization? And put them into public sector.
Different way of thinking.
Yeah.
To say the least.
Because it's true, isn't it, that whenever you're in the public sector, or whenever you're in the private sector, you have a view, certainly in the UK, I think, of the public sector.
You do,
that it's inefficient and, it could be run so much better and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And, I'm always amazed how much sick pay the public sector gets, and all the sort of pension contribution. And you kind of think of, and I part of me is inspired by it. Part of me is like, what would happen if someone like Branson did come in and just look at something like that?
I think it's easy to knock the public sector, and I've probably done it lots of times.
Yeah.
But when you go to other countries sometimes and you see how difficult it is to get things done,
Yeah.
sometimes you come back and look at it. Yeah, sometimes it's a pain, but actually we're quite good at doing that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So
it's not all bad, is it? Really?
No, it's not. But we tend to think that in the UK.
Yeah. Especially as entrepreneurs, because we look at things and think, oh, I can
always
do it
be
better
improved.
than that. Yeah. Just do it this way. What's wrong with you? It's my general thinking.
How hard can it be?
Yes, very Jeremy Clarkson. Yes, yeah. How hard can it be? So let's just talk about then a little bit about what you do. So you help businesses get ready for exit, as in selling their businesses. So you work alongside business owners. I think you said 1 to 10 million, didn't you, when we're talking before?
Yeah, that's a sort of reasonable. I mean, how I got into this, if you like, I was like most business owners. I ran my own company for 20 years. And then a little bit by fluke, I tried to, essentially I franchised it.
Yeah.
And that got me out of the business almost by accident.
Yeah.
And then I realized maybe this is a really good thing.
Yeah.
One thing led to another. That leaded me down a road of trying to raise some money to actually grow my old business that I'd franchised into a national company, but I needed to raise some money.
Yeah.
So that took me to London and Hong Kong and taught me how to put a board together and go and sit in front of investors and all that sort of world, which was great because I'd never done that before. Mm-hmm. From that then led me into mergers and acquisitions world.
Right.
And then I bought a couple of companies, exited one of them, still got another one. But along that journey, and that's been sort of the last 3 or 4 years, I had hundreds of conversations, and I think I did work it out. It was over 1,000 business owners that I've spoke to in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
That all wanted to sell. Now, I was either trying to buy their businesses off them, or I'm doing it on behalf of other people. I've worked with other investors. I've worked with a PLC, and that gave me a massive insight into how they think, and also
no doubt.
how the problems they have. You live in sort of my world now as well, so you know that 80% of businesses never ever sell.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners don't understand that. They're not in our world. The general theory is you work for 30 years, you're successful, you get to a certain age and you sell your business. And that's not reality. So having spoken to a lot of these people, I've made the decision that I'm maybe not really going to buy businesses anymore. I'd rather prefer helping people get to where they will, almost get the value out of the businesses they've built over 30 years or 20, whatever.
Yeah.
But I tend to deal with established companies because I just think it's such a shame. A lot of these people, it's their whole lives. And what's happened to some of them is they try to sell maybe using traditional methods like brokers and that sort of thing. And they tried for 3, 4, even 5 years, and they end up just retiring and closing the doors.
Yeah.
And that's such a shame. And I think, most people don't deserve that. They've put a lot of effort into it. And there's not really a better process. It's just been the same as it's always been for years.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to sort of get out there, come on podcasts like this. I do a little bit of speaking at events as well. Yeah. Anywhere where there's a load of business owners in a room, that's generally where you'll find and that's really where I am now. So that sort of then led to me writing a book called Pathway to Exit, which I like to sort of think gives owners a little bit of a starter, if you like. You can flick through it and see where the pitfalls are, what the difficulties is, that sort of thing. Yeah. And then now that's also then led on to me just starting a new platform online where business owners can actually go on there and get the tools and resources to help themselves rather than employ expensive consultants and things like that. Yeah. So that's sort of a quick, brief history of where I've been and how I've got to where I am. But I do love doing it because you're helping people at the end of the day, and that's always a good thing, especially if you can.
And there's something about the business exit I've sold businesses, and like you say, you and I are in the same space a little bit now. We both get involved in M&A, me more so on the e-com side, but it's one of those where there's something about that exit, right? And it's just that feeling you get when you sell that it's just really great, isn't it? But it's my experiences in selling businesses. It's not as straightforward as you would expect it to be. In fact, it's quite complicated.
It's very hard, and it's not just about finances and numbers. It's about emotions, and it's how that business becomes part of you. And that's quite hard for a lot of business owners to actually let it go. The money's actually sometimes not the most important thing. It's about that. Their whole identity. It's almost like I said before. It's like chopping a leg off. Once they haven't got their business, they don't really know what to do anymore.
Yeah,
they're sort of wandering around the house aimlessly. They might have a big pot of money.
Yeah,
but that's actually suddenly they realise that's the most important thing in their life. So what I try to do is when I'm speaking to business owners about them getting to an exit, it's not sometimes actually an end date. It's like get your business ready for sale. So you can sell it when you're ready, but you've got to put that effort in beforehand. You can't just decide when you're 65, I'm going to sell it, and then 18 months later it's gone. It won't happen.
Yeah.
So and a lot of the crazy thing is when you speak to a business owner, they're always talking about exiting in the next 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then you go and see them in 3 years' time, and they're talking about exiting in the next 2 or 3 years, and that just gets pushed and pushed until something bad happens, or they get to a certain age, or they become ill, or whatever else. So I think a lot of the time it's buying people peace of mind, but it's also the freedom is just as important as the financial side.
Yeah.
So if you can get somebody ready to sell their business or get their business in a state that it's ready for sale, including themselves as well, they've got to have they've got to be of the right mindset where they know they can do something else as well. Mm-hmm. You're also giving them that freedom because any business that's been built to sell is not going to be heavily founder reliant, as they probably are when you first start talking to people. So if you can get them outside the day-to-day, they've suddenly got this piece of time which they've probably never had in their whole life. They might have Fridays to themselves. That's one of the things that I try and push people to do. Is one of the first tasks is can we get your business up to a point where you don't have to work Fridays? Yeah, it sounds like a quite easy thing to do, but actually it's quite difficult. And if you can do that, suddenly not only does it give them a different outlook on life, because they've never had that before probably, and it gives them a new perspective and they think about different things, and then they start looking into maybe even opportunities outside the business they've already got, so that when they do exit, they've got something else to do, which I think is really important for people like us who are in business. We're not really that comfortable in just saying, that's it, I'm done and I'm finished and I'm going to sit on a beach. Doesn't really happen. Doesn't work. So if you can get people to that stage where they've got choices, I think that's the most important thing. Yeah.
Well, we see this, we see this when people retire, don't we?
Yeah.
In the sense you've worked all your life in corporate, you've got this big fat pension pot, which may be slightly diminished now under the recent government changes.
Yeah.
But you've got a big fat pension pot, you've got your tax-free lump sum. And the amount of people that in effect die when they retire is extraordinary, because it's that loss of purpose, that loss of knowing what to do next, that whole side of things. So it makes sense actually with what you're doing, because when it comes to exiting a business, it's the same thing. You've got this pot of money.
It's no different than working in a factory all your life, stopping instantly, and then having a heart attack 2 years later, or just being bored. Because, I get some people can do that. I know people that have actually done that. They've worked all their life, they've stopped and done nothing for 10 years. Great if that's what... But business owners are not that type of people generally.
No.
And I think there's actually that fear there. The same fear they had setting up in the first place is the fear they've got of actually giving it up and walking away and not knowing what... There's this big chasm of what do I do next? It's not about the money.
Yeah.
And that's almost the big loss of identity again.
Yeah.
And I think if you can give people that opportunity to start looking at other things, and that's happened. We had this discussion before.
Yeah,
that's happened to me since I stepped away from day-to-day running of businesses, because you've got all this time.
Yeah,
you draw on all the experiences you've learned over the years, and opportunities just sort of come from nowhere because you're out there. You've got the time to be out there, meeting people, having chats like this, talking to people you'd never ever talk to. And then you just stumble across opportunities, and that just rolls on and on and on. And you just suddenly you're in this whole new world that you never expected to be in, which is great. And that's why I love doing what I do.
Ah, fantastic. So for you personally then, what's been some of the big challenges that you've sort of had to face either in this or maybe what led you up to it? I don't know. But what are some of the big things that you've had to go through to sort of get to this point?
I think initially when I wanted to get out of my first business, because I've only ever had one job in my life from 18 to 23. I worked for an architect when I was young. And at 23, I went freelance.
Right.
So I was in the business world of survival, if you like, from an early age. Then I set up on my own from going on for freelance. But I think the hardest part was actually getting out the day-to-day. And most people, that is the big blocker to everybody. Once you've done that, that's a great world to be in.
Yeah.
I think the other biggest challenge was, as we've spoken about before, I did buy a distressed company.
Yeah.
Which had 33 staff and £2.5 million revenue.
Yeah.
And I bought it in the middle of COVID and it was in trouble.
Yeah.
And I had to do a complete turnaround and rescue of that. And that taught me probably more in that 2 years than I'd learned the 20 years before.
Right.
In a good way. It was painful at the time. I had to do lots of stuff just to keep it going, if you like. But what that did teach me is nothing is the end generally. There's always something that comes after.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of business owners, when they have a company, and especially when it's their only form of income, which is another psychological twist to all of this, is if you've got 2 or 3 companies and one of them goes wrong or fails, if you like, you can still pay the mortgage because you've got the other 2.
You've got the others, yeah.
If you've just got one business, like most people, and they've ran it for 20 years, you will probably make bad decisions. When times are tough, you probably won't think twice about remortgaging your house and dropping 50 grand into it to keep the company going, to keep all the staff because they become your friends and family, which is great, but it's not really a clever business decision to mix your personal finances with business finance. If business can't stand on its own 2 feet or borrow money on its own 2 feet without personal guarantees and things like that, you've got to ask the question: should it really be carried on with? And some people might look at that as a little bit mercenary, but that is the reality of the world. And I think as soon as you start, and when we see this all the time, you speak to people who want to sell their company, and actually they want to sell it because they're so heavily indebted to it personally. They may have had personal guarantees on big loans. They might have remortgaged their house. Yeah, they can't really escape from it because if that company goes down, they lose their house. Yeah. So they just keep reinvesting and getting in deeper and deeper and deeper. When really they should have said, no, cut it here.
Yeah. Enough.
Let's move on. But that's a really hard decision. Whereas if you've got, now I don't generally own 100% of anything. I tend to own like 20, 30% of a number of businesses. And I just think it makes you make more commercial decisions. And generally a lot more sensible. Because it's not an emotional decision; it's a purely financial one. Yeah,
that's such a powerful point, isn't it? Because, you've seen distressed companies, I've seen distressed companies. Yeah, and one of the common things that you see in distressed companies, a common theme, I think, at the moment is bounce back loans. From the COVID bounce back loans, everyone's got them in the balance sheet. And it's like, there's still 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand spent back on, and this just borrowing money. To try and get through the next phase. I get why people did take the bounce back. I know it's not a criticism, but I can see that now people are struggling to pay that back. I think, and it's causing distress.
And certainly in the last 12 months, maybe a little bit in 22, 23, I think a lot of people suffered because interest rates went up a lot. That was almost like COVID's finished, but the world's now catching up. And I think that was not a good time for a lot of people. Yeah. Because all of the things that they'd done during COVID were now becoming real, if you like, and you can't escape it forever.
That's true. It is so true. It's an interesting one, isn't it? And you're right. I can see people just plowing money into these things because it's their dream, and so then what happens is, like I get approached by companies, and it's like, well, we need you to invest because we just need to spend more money on marketing or whatever. It's I just need more money to. And it's just like, well, actually, I think...
Do you really need money? Yeah. That is quite common, isn't it?
It is quite a common thing. It's just the belief that more money is going to solve the problem.
Yeah. A lot of the time, it's not the money they need. No. It's more direction and... Yeah. Because like you say, everyone says, if I just put more money into marketing, I'll get more work. It's like, not necessarily.
No. The amount of conversations I've talked people out of putting more money in marketing. Yeah. Just because actually that's not the problem right now. There are some deeper issues that we need to work on and resolve. Yeah. But marketing is certainly not the...
And everybody wants to be bigger as well. They don't really... Everyone refers to revenue all the time as a bit of an ego thing, whereas obviously we all know the profits. If you're not making a profit on the money you're making at the moment, just getting bigger is not going to cure that. Yeah. You're just going to make a bigger loss on a bigger turnover, and you're just going to... So get the model right first, and then start ramping it up.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's been a fascinating few years, actually. The last 3 or 4 since COVID has been really interesting.
Yeah.
The biggest takeaway really is the opportunity cost, though. When you're out there talking to people of the same sort of mindset who have got a little bit of time to do new things and experiment, that's just game changing, really.
Yeah.
So I'm not really looking forward to next year, because as I've now only got one company now, I've got rid of most things that I had. I've got all this time on my hand, which is great. And it's just
so you're a practitioner of what you preach, in the sense of do you take the Fridays off?
I try to, yeah. We're here today on a Friday, but
do you know what? Thursday. You confusing me.
Sorry, it's Thursday. Yes.
Like what?
I think, to be fair, at the moment I'm quite lucky. I've got one business at the moment, and I probably only have to work a couple of hours a day on it. I don't actually take Fridays off. However, Friday is what I call is my fun day. I do all the business things that I want to do that are interesting and fun. They're not day-to-day practical things. They're generally meeting people and having interesting conversations.
Right.
So although I'm preaching take Fridays off, this is more the opportunity side of it.
Yeah.
It's when I say, right, I'm not doing anything to do with normal business.
Yeah.
I'm just arranging lunches with people and having really fascinating conversations.
Yeah.
And that's great fun. Because if you're meeting the right people, something will come of that. So I suppose technically it is business, but it doesn't feel like it. It just feels like
you're not in the office and you're not up to your eyeballs in email, right? That's the difference, isn't it? You're, and I think for me, Fridays, we've talked about this before. Ironically, I tend not to be in the office on Fridays. I'm either in the wood shop, because woodwork crafting is my kind of hobby, or I'm in the van down by the river. But if I'm in the van down by the river, I will be working, but it's creative working. It's the writing, it's the creating, it's the strategizing, it's the not working on the minutiae, the day-to-day.
It's the stuff that gets you to the next level.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just would love to do that, but they haven't got time.
Yeah.
They're too busy doing day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone talks about this. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
But it's actually making it practical is a massive step for most people. And I don't think many people, well, if people could do it on their own, they would have done it already. I'm not saying I'm the only person that can help them, because I'm not, but if they've got somebody from outside the business just geeing them along, even if that's a phone call every other week or a meeting on the last day of the month or whatever, just to say, look, you haven't really done this month, have you? Why don't we do this together?
Yeah.
Just that person in the background being annoying, sat on your shoulder occasionally, will make a difference.
Yeah.
And I think that's what a lot of people want. Because if not, they'll just carry on doing what they've always doing, because it's habit, and it's being in the comfort zone again. A lot of people actually are quite, if you told them to turn their phone off at lunchtime on a Friday, they would really hate that.
They would struggle.
They're struggling. Like, what happens if, what happens that? It's like, it's not going to burn down in a Friday afternoon. You come back, whatever the problem, Monday morning, it'll still be there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's because people think they're more important than what they really are.
It's probably quite true.
But it's not, in an afternoon, it's not. If you tripped over and broke your arm and went to A&E in the afternoon, you wouldn't give it a second thought.
No.
But people don't seem to look at it the same. So I think that's the first step, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that I did actually, which made a big difference, was I got two, because on the phones these days you can have multiple SIM cards with these eSIM cards, can't you?
Yeah, different numbers.
And so I have a business one and a personal one.
Yeah.
And so I got around the cold sweat thing by saying, right, I'm just going to shut the business line down. But at least my wife and kids, I can still talk to them.
Yeah,
right?
I get that.
And that's been a bit of a game changer. Now, what Apple haven't done yet, and Apple, if you're listening, I think it would be nice if I could just switch. If I was in like a mode, like a private mode, then it just shut the business line down and it opened up the other line. So I'm surprised they've not done something like that. An Android user is probably going to tell me you can do it on Android.
Probably.
Because I dare say you can do everything on Android. But as it is, I'm in the Apple ecosystem. But I think doing things like that, getting away, being creative, thinking about it.
Yep.
And because what that also does, Andrew, is it forces you to make sure that the 4 days you're in the office are really effective.
It does, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It causes them...
If you're not in on the Friday afternoon, you get the same amount of work done, let's be fair. It's a bit like the 4-day week, isn't it? People say, well, I don't want to work... When they're employed, they say, I want to do 4 days a week now for the same money.
Yeah.
And employers actually say, fair enough, you can do that
Yeah.
because they know you're going to do 5 days working 4, really.
Yeah.
It's not actually going to make that much difference.
No, it's
for
not.
some people.
And certainly if you're paying on the basis of outcome, it's an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like, well, these are the outcomes. You do them in 4 days or 5 days. I don't care about. I'm paying you for the outcome.
Yeah.
It is a really fascinating idea. Let me ask. So you've been working for yourself for a long time. You've bought businesses. You've spoke to a lot of people in business. You're doing what you're doing now, which is great. What's the thing you're most proud of?
I think there's been 2 or 3 occasions in the last couple of years, based on me generally being on stage on an event.
Okay.
Probably ones you've been at as well, where people have.
Yeah, I was your official photographer.
Where people have told me. There's been a couple of occasions where people have said, and these are people who are a lot more successful than me.
Yeah.
Came up afterwards, said to me, one said, you inspired me to do this, buy this business.
Yeah.
And they've done it because of something I said on stage.
Yeah.
And the other one actually said to me, I mentioned this to you earlier, about they went home and they took Friday afternoon off.
Yeah.
And they said it changed their whole world. And it says the most important thing anyone had ever said to them that year.
Yeah.
And these are people I consider cleverer than I am.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes it's like we said, you need someone from the outside who can look at it very simply and go, just why don't you do that then? And it's so simple. It's like everything. The easiest things are the obvious, but when you're in it, you don't. So I think things like that are great because you can see you've had an impact really quickly by doing nothing particularly clever. So that I'd love to be able to do that, apply that to more people because if you can change the way people work and I think that would be a nice thing to do in the future.
It's interesting you said that. So the thing that you're most proud of is having this impact on people in a positive way, which is a noble cause in many ways. But I'm kind of curious as to why you said that. What is it about?
Well, I think if you're having an impact on people, it means you must be doing something right. Because at the end of the day, we can all earn money, but if by having the experience of being around a bit, I mean, I'm a bit older than you, but whether that's success or failure, I think if you can have an impact for good on how people are in their working environment, especially if you're speaking to people who have worked for 30 years and they've never had that little bit of freedom and you've gave it them. It's like, what's not good about that? Yeah. So
you feel good about it, don't you? And
and
having that positive impact.
And
I just think it's a really good noble cause. And, I think not every person in the human race will want a positive impact on people, but the majority of people do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I live for that. I'm not one of these. I'm not a Google guy. I'm out here to make money like everybody else. I'm in business, but if you can do that at the same time, then it's it feels right, doesn't it?
It does, and I think actually one of the easiest ways to build a business that lasts is to go and help somebody. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And if you can focus on impacting and making somebody else's life better, you've always got a business. And
both, funnily enough, both of those people that said those things to me have made a big impact on them. I've done business with them afterwards. So it leads to something else.
It does lead to something else, doesn't it?
And hopefully that will happen again.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way to look at it is.
Yeah.
And money, what's wrong in earning money helping people?
It's an interesting one, isn't it? And I think it's one of those sort of old school principles that never gets tired, that actually figuring out someone that, find someone that needs help and help them.
Yeah, so find the problem and try. I mean, we all hear this when we're younger, doesn't it? Oh, don't concentrate on the money. Find something that fix a problem and do it right, and the money will come. Well, it's actually sort of true. You figure it out when you're 50. It actually makes most of these things do make sense, but you don't believe them when you're younger. So I think that is it's easy to say that, but
that's true. No, loving this. I'm curious then. So you've, like I say, you've got all this stuff going on with your business. You're jetting off all around the world, speaking at these events. You're working with businesses, you're speaking to business leaders, you're helping them exit. How do you stay on top of it all? How do you recharge your batteries and stay on top of your own game?
I like to think if I'm ever going, always try and mix business with pleasure. So if we've got an event, like we've just come back from Miami not long ago.
Yeah.
I always try and have a couple of days either side.
Yeah.
I've never been to Miami before. Went there for an event to speak. Popped in and out a little bit. Didn't spend all the time at the event. Did loads of interesting things. So doing both together, it doesn't feel like work then.
Yeah.
And of course, then it's tax deductible as well, which is even better. But that's the way I like to do it, because I think just having work or pleasure sometimes doesn't quite work. I do like cutting off and just disappearing for the weekend and holidays and things like that. But I actually quite enjoy mixing the two. It's quite nice because you get a bit of that balance then. You're there for a reason, but you can also have the downtime as well.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you seem like you were properly enjoying Miami.
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, it's great.
So you were speaking at the events. You came into some of the sessions, but you were off doing crazy American things with machine guns. In a controlled environment, it has to be said.
Yeah, not on the street.
In Miami, along with everybody else. But
I try to do that everywhere. I mean, we've done events in Miami, we've done events in Boston, Dubai, London. So always try and get out and about. It's a great way of seeing different parts of the world as well.
It is.
And also, that obviously then leads to meeting people in different countries. So I'm doing business with people in Canada at the moment, which I never have dreamt of even 4 years ago. Yeah. All because of going to an event in Miami, meet someone who's Canadian, get talking, do some business with them. So, and again, that gives you another perspective, because we're all guilty of working in the country that we were born in.
Yes.
And we very, very rarely go outside that.
Yeah.
And this has given me an opportunity to meet people from generally English-speaking countries around the world, but that's still a fair few.
Still a fair,
and that's been fascinating, because the different countries have always got their different perspective. Obviously, if you can compare the States with UK, it's a totally different environment. Yeah, same principles apply, but so I'm starting to enjoy that actually.
Yeah, it's really that travel thing. I think is a really unique thing that I've experienced more so. The sort of the latter part of my working career. I mean, to be fair, when I was younger in my 20s, I was designing and installing health spas. Which was great fun, and I met some really fascinating people, including some very famous people, some very wealthy people, and I really enjoyed that. But more recently, I've been traveling a lot more, like with coaching and the acquisition side of things. So I go to the States a lot, New Zealand, And whenever you do something like a travel to New Zealand, I do this thing where I go, right, well, I've got to stop somewhere, like Hong Kong or Dubai or Singapore or KL, in Malaysia, and you just you've got to stop somewhere, because there's not a non-stop flight. And actually, that's quite nice, because that stopping, you just go, right, I'm just going to spend 4 days in Hong Kong. Why? Because I've never been. I'm just going to go look around. Yeah. And so when you get to your end destination in New Zealand, you've spent 4 days exploring. Yeah. And it's a beautiful thing.
It's generally on your own as well. Yeah. And I know it's a really selfish thing to say, but most people never get that. You could travel abroad with your family or whatever, your kids, which is great, don't get me wrong. But there's something really special and selfish about traveling on your own. Yeah. And you can use the excuse of business to do that. It's great. Like you said, I've been to Hong Kong I went there for 4 days when I was trying to raise some money a few years ago. And it's just like, you've got whole days to yourself, just walking around a city. I mean, that's really like quite inspiring to do that, because most people never get that. It's like people look at, I'd never go on holiday on my own. Well, this isn't a holiday, it's business. You've got a reason to go. You've got people to meet there, so you're not really on your own. It's like next week I'm doing an event in London, but I'll go the day before, but I'll always arrange a couple of business meetings with people.
Why would you not?
And again, you just get that time to just sort of explore and have new conversations. But if it's in a different country, it's great.
That's magical.
No, it is. And that's why I love Miami so much last time. And,
we had a great time. We found some good places to go eat.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. And again, it's just different perspective on life, isn't it? You meet people from different...
And just seeing things differently and experiencing the different cultures. And...
I mean, they talk about travel broadening the mind, but I think from a business point of view, it's even more... I don't really know what the word to say is, but it's much more heightened in business than it is in just traveling on a holiday. Yeah, it is. You get different perspectives of people in another country.
You do, and I'm really grateful for the work that we ended up doing in New Zealand, because it forced me to take these breaks, right? So when I go to the States, I'm in the same mode that I'm in when I drive a car, right?
Yeah.
I'm here, I want to get there as quickly as possible, do what I need to do, and then get back.
Yeah.
And it's very much that mindset. Boom, boom. And when I was traveling to New Zealand and you had to stop, I'm like, well, I may as well make the most of this time.
Yeah.
It's translated now into, last week I went down to Exeter. I'm in Liverpool at the moment. And if you don't know English geography, Liverpool to Exeter, it's a bit of a journey.
Bit of a trek.
Bit of a trek. But my son is at uni down in Exeter. And so I went down on the Thursday night. We were going to hang out all day Friday. And then I drove back on the Saturday. When I drove down on the Thursday and when I drove with the Saturdays, and a classic example, normally I would get in the car. I would go as fast as I could go without thinking that I'm going to lose my license if I get pulled by a police officer. And obviously driving safely and according to the road conditions. And that's what I would do. And I would stop as the least amount of times possible. You're on a motorway, it's boring.
Yep, straight there.
Straight there. Now, because I've got the van as well, which really helps me, I'm like, I don't care what time I get home. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to stop probably 3 or 4 times along the way. And I'm going to just do different things. So then the Saturday became about enjoying the journey. Now, sure, I got home 4 hours later than maybe I normally would have got home. But I was so chilled.
Didn't feel tired, no.
I was relaxed. I had a big time, and I managed to get a whole bunch of stuff done on the way, which was just wonderful. And so this attitude of I've got to go from A to B, I'm going to go as fast as humanly possible. I think that's quite entrepreneurial. But actually, just slowing down a little bit.
It's that time efficiency thing of a business person, isn't it? I did that when I started doing events. Literally fly into the country the night before, but at 11 o'clock or something stupid, because I've been working in the day before.
Yeah.
Wake up in the morning, do the event for 2 days, get straight back on a plane the second it left and go back home. And it's just like, it was great, but it was a whirlwind.
Yeah.
Just having that
and
day.
You come back tired.
Yeah. A big adrenaline rush, but maybe it's because we think we're important jet setters and all that. But having that day on either end or 2 days before or something just makes it a totally different experience. And you come back more relaxed and it's like, actually, that was really worthwhile rather than just see it as a chore, if you like, or a job to do.
Yeah.
That can almost come at, when you say enjoying the journey as well, it's a bit of a cliche, but it's a bit the same in business, isn't it? A lot of people are always focused on the end result. I need to do that. I need to go to the next stage. I need to earn this more money. It needs to be revenue, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And you can lose 5 years doing that.
You can.
If you forget about, you sort of enjoy the process along the way.
Yeah.
You've got to take time out to say, what have I just done this year? What am I doing next year?
Yeah.
Am I enjoying this? I need to take some time out for myself.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't do that at all. They just
it's
power on through for 10, 20 years. And you can forget, you can lose years of your life by doing that. And yes, you might progress, but someone will say, what did you do 2 years ago? You can't remember. I didn't do anything. I didn't go on holiday. I was too busy with work.
Yeah.
And that's not really the world I want to be in. It's just a case of I want to enjoy as we go.
Yeah, I the more we're talking about this, the more I'm going, yes, amen.
But again, we can all talk about it, but putting it into practice
doing it is a difficult thing.
Which is like hopefully where I can help people out.
Yeah, absolutely.
I managed to do it for myself, so hopefully I can do it for other people now.
Well, yeah, we obviously have. So what does growth look like?
Growth to me is freedom now. I am I'm 58 now, getting old. Fortunate enough, like we said before, don't really have to work every day anymore. I have that choice, but that freedom is worth everything to me now.
Yeah.
That's my growth. I know when you're younger, you have to do the financial bit.
Yeah.
But like a lot of the business owners that I speak to, they've done the financial bit.
Yeah.
They're all in their 60s generally. Freedom is what they're really after, but they don't quite know how to get there.
Yeah.
So to me, having that freedom, most people want money, but they don't realize the reason they want the wealth is because that will give them the freedom to do what they want.
Yeah.
But there is a sort of halfway house where, you can have a bit of wealth, but you don't need to be up there with whoever else.
Yeah.
You don't need tens of millions of pounds to not work 4 days a week.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people miss that. They aim for the big, massive numbers.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a nice balance in having a healthy income and being able to have a nice, relaxed lifestyle.
Yeah.
This is generally people who are getting a bit older. You're not going to get that in your 30s. It just doesn't happen, does it?
Yeah.
But normal business people that have been working for 20, 30 years, I think that's my sort of wealth to me is freedom and time to just jump on a plane and go and do an event in wherever and enjoy it as it's not really work.
Yeah.
And having that freedom to travel around, when it's cold in the UK, like today, it'd be nice just to say, stuff it, I'm going to Dubai for a month in January and then come back. And that's my plan for the future now is to.
It's interesting how you said you're 58 and this is how you're thinking now in terms of this is what growth looks like, what success looks like for you at the moment. Yeah. There's this phrase that I heard, I don't know where it came from, which was in the first part of your life, you're focused on success. In the second part of your life, you're focused on significance. And actually implying that the definition of success sort of changes as you get older. Would your 25-year-old self, freelancing, starting up your own business, would they have talked the same way that you have just talked?
Not at all. I would never have thought, even in my 30s, the goal wasn't to have more time to do the things I want. The goal was to earn as much money as possible because you think that having the money leads to buying the things you want, having the nice lifestyle, but actually it's the time that's the thing that everybody tells you that's important, but nobody seems to take any notice of it.
Yeah.
We all just gloss over it and go, let's go on to the next deal. Yeah. But actually you're doing the business and the deal because you want the time to do what you like. And that's to me, it's not really growth, it's having the choice, isn't it? It's like it's been said many times before that money is just the tool to get you the things you want. Yeah. And most people want time or freedom. Yeah. Nobody really loves going to work every single day, every hour of the day, and in the night as well. And I get people that love business, but there's got to be that balance there where you can take time out.
Yeah, I think, and you're right, the older you get, the more you sort of realize actually perhaps the way you thought about it when you were younger is different.
I think that's the natural order of things though, isn't it? I mean, when you're younger, time's not... You've got so much of it. You've got so much of it. So you plow on and work hard to make as much cash as you like, basically. You just think that's what success is, which probably is at that age. Yeah. And again, you're trying to prove yourself. And money's the only
real measurement, isn't it?
It is, and that's it. Whereas once you get older and you haven't got a mortgage anymore, you don't really, you've played around with nice cars and done all of that sort of stuff, which I have done. Suddenly you realise that actually the freedom that's where it's at.
That's what's important.
Maybe other people might think differently, but for me, freedom is the word I think I'm looking for.
Freedom. I've got Mel Gibson in my head. But I thought, freedom!
There's a whole world out there to explore.
Yeah, there is.
A lot of people don't see much of it.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when I was like 18, 19, I went and lived in the States. Took some time out before going to uni, went and lived in the States. Yeah. And it felt back then that was a massive thing. Like,
it probably was that.
It was. Yeah, I mean, this is in the when's this going to be? This is late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there. Yeah. And it felt like a massive deal. You were going and living in another country that was like far away. Yeah. Whereas now the world is so small because it's so easy to travel.
It is, yeah.
It's so easy to connect and communicate with people. Like when I was living in the States, you wouldn't call home every 5 minutes because it would cost a small fortune. You would handwrite letters because email wasn't a thing.
I know. I do have I have these conversations with my kids actually sometimes as well. I've got kids that are older now, and they talk about when they were looking for jobs, and I was just like, you just don't realise you can go on Indeed and put your CV on, and you'll get responses the same day. Yeah. We used to have to buy a newspaper, look at the adverts, fill in an application form, post it at the post office, wait for 2 weeks for a reply. And it's like, but that's just the world we all live in. It's changed 100%. But
it really has.
And it is a small world now. And like you said, only yesterday, it was like I was having Zoom calls with Canada at 8 o'clock at night. Yeah. I've never done this before, actually. I've done stuff overseas before, but I've never done the American time zone thing, which is a real pain. Yeah. It's like everyone really wants to speak to me at 8 o'clock at night. It's like, no, I'm done. I finished at 5 o'clock. In fact, I finish at 4 o'clock most days. Yeah. And I'm like, no, I've got to have a call now with the States. And it's like, So that's a new experience, but I would never have dreamt of that even 3 years ago.
Yeah, it's funny how much smaller the world is.
I think the other side of what I do now is I love meeting people. I love having these sort of conversations.
Yeah.
It's a bit like if you go to a business event where, like we do, where everyone's similar thinking, because we're quite rare people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You don't have these these conversations with your friends and family.
No.
So if you can go somewhere where everyone's the same and have a conversation, it's like going to a party, I think.
Yeah.
But you're meeting people that think like you.
Yeah.
So I love doing that all the time. I can do that every day of the week.
Yeah, yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's great. It's great. Before we go, Andrew, it's been a great conversation. This is where I ask you for a question for me. This is what you're going to say, Matt, my question for you is, and if you're new to the show, this is where I take Andrew's question. I don't answer it. I take your question and I answer it on social media. So if you want to know my answer to the question, come follow me on social media. But what's your question for me?
What's your definition of success?
Very good. First time I've actually been asked that, which it surprised me actually. But what's my definition of success? If you want to know more, come find me on Instagram or on LinkedIn at Matt Edmundson on both. And I will answer that question there. But Andrew, thank you so much for joining me, man. Really enjoyed it.
Really great.
How do people reach you? How do they connect with you? How do they find out more if they want to do that?
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Quickest way. I'm all over LinkedIn quite a bit. Or go on my website, andrewhartshorn.co.uk.
So we will, of course, link to the website and the LinkedIn profile in the show notes, which you can get along for free with a transcript on the website at pushtobemore.com. The links will also be in the show notes. So if you're listening on the podcast app, just scroll down. Links will be there. You can tap them. If you're on YouTube, go to the description, click links in there. Just reach out to Andrew, say, how's it? And just tell him, thanks for coming on the show. And a big thanks to you, man. I really enjoyed it. I've enjoyed this conversation.
Right. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, been good. Stretch the old grey matter. Which is nice. So thanks for coming on. Well, there you go. Another show complete. Make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, wherever you get your podcast from, because obviously we've got more great conversations lined up and I don't want you to miss any of them because, why would I? If no one's told you yet today, let me be the first. You are awesome. Yes, you are. Created awesome. It's just a burden you've got to bear. Andrew's got to bear it. I've got to bear it. You've got to bear it as well. Now, this show is produced by the wonderful team at Pod Junction, so a big shout out to them. Josh Edmundson wrote the theme music, who is an absolute legend. As I said, everything's available on the website, pushtobemore.com. You can sign up to the newsletter and we send you all the stuff out. All of it's just go to the website, pushtobemore.com, and you'll see what I mean. But that's it from me. That's it from Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic week wherever you are in the world. I will see you next time. Bye for now.